Hello, welcome to this video on Adobe Illustrator and logo design, brought to you by Calcom Technologies. Throughout this video, we are going to teach you to create your own custom graphics and logos. Before we get into all the different tools that are available to you and the different features that this program allows you to take advantage of, we need to discuss exactly what Adobe Illustrator is and what it allows you to accomplish. Adobe Illustrator is a program that allows you to create vector-based images. What does this mean exactly? There are two types of images that we'll need to get familiar with as we're going forward. They are bitmap images and vector images. Bitmap images are best suited for photorealistic images with complex color variations. Bitmap images are fixed to a grid, which makes them very hard to increase in size without causing distortion to the image. As you increase the size of a bitmap image, you'll begin to notice an overall loss of sharpness and jagged edges around it. In contrast to bitmaps, vector images are mathematically based. They lend themselves to situations where it is necessary to have very precise measurements. Due to the fact that they are mathematically based, they can be scaled to any size. This is very important for images such as logos and graphics that could later on be used for large signs such as billboards. We're going to take a closer look at the initial slide that we showed in the beginning. On this slide, you're going to be able to see an example of both types of images, a vector and a bitmap. I'm going to get rid of this text over here as we don't need it right now. I'm going to grab this Adobe Illustrator. This is the logo for Adobe Illustrator, and it's actually a bitmap image. As we go to enlarge the bitmap image, you're going to notice that it's going to start to look less and less crisp as we make it larger. And as we zoom in, you'll be able to see the jagged edges along the lines. Also around the circle here, you'll start to see that it gets a little bit blurry. I'm going to zoom out, and we're going to make that smaller again. We're going to grab this Calcom Technologies logo. The Calcom Technologies logo is actually a vector-based image. You'll notice that as you select it, you're going to see a lot more points of detail. We're going to zoom in here so you can see that even clearer. Different points on the different curves and the edges of the different points in the logo. I'm going to move this up here. And we're going to resize this logo. Now when I go to move this handle here and drag it to make the image larger, I'm going to hold down the shift key. The shift key locks in the proportion of the image so that it doesn't look skewed as we make it larger. Now you notice that even as we made it larger, there's no loss of quality, there's no jagged edges, there's no unexpected changes to the image. I'm going to resize it down, but one thing to note is what happens when you don't hold down the shift key and you resize an image. If you don't hold down the shift key, you have the ability to resize it in any shape, way, fashion that you like, but obviously the ramifications of that are that the image can start to look distorted. When you design an image, you design it with a certain ratio or image resolution in mind, and you're going to want to keep that consistent as you use it throughout. Some of the tools that are available to you in Adobe Illustrator. We're not going to get to cover all of them due to the short amount of time that we have, but you're going to see more usage of them throughout the video and in future videos to come. You also have the ability to check and test these out on your own. Going over to the left side here, you'll notice that you'll be able to hover over all of the tools and get a description of what that tool is and also what the shortcut key is for that particular tool. The first tool we'll cover is the selection tool, which is probably the tool you'll use the most in Illustrator, and you'll use that to select items on the artboard. Just now I clicked on the Calcom Technologies logo and it selected the whole logo. To the right of that tool, you'll notice the direct selection tool, which allows you to grasp items at a more specific scale. So if I click on the C icon here, or the C letter here, it'll only grab the C instead of grabbing the whole logo. If I grab the A, it'll only grab the A. There's also the magic wand tool. I'm going to deselect what we have here and then activate the magic wand tool. The magic wand tool tries to think for you and say, hey, I know what this person wants to select here. So if I were to grab the C or click on the C letter here, it selects everything that looks just like that letter. So in this case, it grabs everything up on top here except for the earth symbol here. The reason that it chose that is because of the gradient and the font that is used for the Calcom, and it looks the same and says, hey, he's probably trying to grab that item. I'm going to deselect that, and we're going to go over here and also take a look at type, which works just like any other type tools you would see in any word processor or other creative suite. Click on the screen and you'll get a cursor start blinking, and you're going to type whatever text you want. And when you're done, just hit escape. And now you have the word logo here, and you can move that around on the screen and manipulate it as you see fit. You have modifiers up here such as the font, character, opacity, font size, alignment, all these things that you're familiar with from other applications. I'm going to get rid of that. Over here we have the line tool, and one thing to know about any of the tools that have this little arrow in the bottom right hand corner, that means that there are additional options for that particular tool. So for the line segment tool, if I click on and hold the line segment tool, I'll get a pop-up which gives me other tools that it feels should be grouped in that particular nature and will allow me to select them. So instead of a line tool, I could create an arc. And as you select tools, you'll notice that there's always different options for them up along the top as well. I'm going to hold down Control Z or Command Z, depending on if you're using a Mac or a PC, just to undo what I did and get rid of that particular line. And I'm going to reselect my line segment tool. The same can be said for the rectangle tool. Over here, if you click on that option and hold on it, you'll get other types of shapes that you create: polygons, ellipse, rounded rectangles, stars. I'm going to select the polygon tool here just to demonstrate one quick thing over here, and that's when you go to create a polygon, it remembers the last polygon I tried to create, which is a triangle. But if while I'm creating this icon, this symbol, I can hit the up arrow key to increase the number of sides of the polygon, and the down key will remove them. Just a quick thing to note that may come in handy later on. I'm going to delete that and get that out of there. You have your paintbrush tool and also your eraser tool, which works as you would expect them to as they do in other programs. They'll come in handy as well. Out of the screen, there are several panels available to you that provide access to certain resources or modify the way certain elements on the screen look. We're going to go into more details into some of these later on, but just to show you how these look and work, if you click on one of these options, for one, if you hover over them, it gives you a description of it, but if you click on it, the tool will fly out, and group tools will be available to you via tabs such as these. This symbols panel right here will be very useful to you as well, as they have already been populated with some symbols that are good starting points for some logos that you may try to create. If you find yourself using a panel more and more frequently, you do have the option of customizing the way they are look and laid out. You could take the symbols, take it completely out of that dock, and move it to the left side of the screen. Another thing that you can do is click on this arrow here to expand all of these tools here and make them all easily visible to you. When you do this, you are sacrificing some workspace, and at times it can be a little distracting, so I prefer to keep mine to the side. Should you decide to move things around and later regret it, it's very simple to get things back to normal. You simply go up here to this drop down here and click on Reset Essentials. Now everything's back to the default. Now that we've gone over some of the basic functions and tools within Adobe Illustrator, and I do want to emphasize that it is basic because there are so many that we haven't touched on yet that you're going to learn over time via future exercises and experimentation on your own part. But we have enough now that will allow us to start playing around and trying to create a new logo. The first thing we're going to do is create a new file by clicking File, New. And I'm just going to use the defaults that are already there to create a new workspace for us, new artboard. We're going to be creating a logo for a company called Novel Housing Investments. The key to a good logo design or a good logo design is to experiment. It's unlikely that you're going to be able to use your first idea to come up with a final logo. The first thing I like to do though is get the name of the company on the artboard and just start playing around with fonts and seeing what looks right. We're going to raise the font up to a larger size, about 40. Alright, so now we got Novel Housing Investments. The first thing I want to do is determine what part of this name is actually going to get used. Right now it's kind of long. Logos, you want to keep them short and concise, clean. You want to be able to put them anywhere. So maybe we need to shorten this. Maybe just drop it down to Novel Housing. Alright, so we got Novel Housing. We're going to want to now try to find a font that's appropriate for this industry and this company name. What I'm doing now is creating duplicates of this text by holding down the Option key on my Mac. It's going to be the Alt key on your PC. Just going to give me a few more so that I can find a font that I like. One thing you want to note here is what's called a Smart Guide. A Smart Guide is this green line here, which is helping me line up this text horizontally and vertically with the other text objects. This is going to come in handy in logo design and other graphics designs in the future, as you're going to be trying to line up different elements of your logo with different parts of the image. So I'm going to finish lining up this text here. I'm going to create one more just so I have some options. Now I have 6 instances of the text showing Novel Housing, and I'm going to play around with some fonts to see if I see anything that I like. Now when you are selecting the font, you can actually start typing in the name of the font if you know it, or you can click on this drop down menu and browse through. I'm going to pick another one here. You can also highlight this text and hit the up arrow and browse through this way and see what different fonts come up. There's a ton of them, so this could take a little time, but sometimes you can stumble across a good one that you weren't familiar with and otherwise might not have seen. And it's always a good idea to pick some different fonts and keep it fresh. There's a script font that we found there. And we're going to find one more font. Sometimes I'll just highlight this text and type in one letter and start scrolling down from there and see what I stumble across. Here we have 6 instances of the novel housing text, and we're going to work with those and just kind of eyeball them and see if anything jumps out at us. Just out the gate, I'm looking at these two logos here, and they don't scream real estate to me. So I'm going to grab the selection tool and get those out of there. This one I'm not really feeling too much either. So now I'm down to 3 options here. I'll line those up just to kind of eyeball them. And this Palatino one I like. It's clean. It's kind of modern. So I think I'm going to try to work with that one to begin with and see what we come up with. These other ones are kind of similar, so we'll play around with them later on. But for now, we're going to start with this Palatino. Now, right now, it's pretty boring. It's just some black text, and there's a ton of things that you can do with fonts and text to distinguish the words. One example, or one idea, is to change the color in the second word. And that's simply done by highlighting that part of the word, grabbing this color key, color box here, or you can go over here on the side and play around with these colors here. There's a number of ways of changing colors, and you'll see it applied here in real time. You can even butt those up against each other and maybe bold. Oops. That second word there. Now that green's a little hard on the eyes, so maybe pick something a little bit more subtle. Start with maybe a dark orange. That's a little bit easier on the eyes. So that's a simple, already just a simple text logo that could very well be used. A lot of company logos are just that, text without even having a symbol. Obviously, this blue isn't within the scheme of things that we're looking to do. So we're going to double click on that, select it. Actually, I'm going to do it from here. Change it to matching orange that we've been using in our theme. And right now it doesn't have a stroke. Let's add a black stroke to it to make it stand out just a little bit more. And now it looks to fit our logo concept just a little bit more. So what we're going to do now is scale it down. And again, I'm going to hold down the shift key as I'm scaling. To maintain the ratio. And one thing we could do is set it off here to the side of our logo. And that already looks pretty cool. But what I might want to do now is use our guides to make this a little bit more even. So I'm going to hit Command R or Control R depending on what operating system you're on to show our rulers. You can also get that underneath View, Rulers, Show and Hide Rulers will be here. And from that ruler, I'm going to grab a guide and bring it down here to the top of this end. We'll also grab one and bring it to the bottom of the end. And what I'm going to do now is adjust this house so that the very top of it matches up with the end. Make it a little bit larger. Now we have an even level on the house in the end. And I kind of like that. That looks pretty cool, clean. We're going to duplicate that one more time. And move this up out of the way. Another variation on that would be to move this house in between the words as a separator. So I'm going to take that out of the way temporarily, grab our text tool, and insert a few spaces in there. Now we can move that house right there. Now it's a little off center, or it's not centered in between the words, and I'm strictly eyeballing this, but I'm going to select the house, and you can nudge it over simply by hitting the arrow keys, and this gives you a little bit finer control on how far you move the item that you have selected. And now it looks pretty balanced there. So there's another variation. Move that up. Now I'm nudging the current logo up by hitting the arrow key. I'm hitting the arrow key while holding down the shift key, which creates a bigger jump, as opposed to not holding the shift key now and just hitting up smaller intervals that it's moving at. Another nice shortcut that you might want to utilize later on. I'm going to play with one more variation on this particular logo. I'm going to again duplicate it and select the whole logo. So now we have 4 logo variations to work with here, and I think we're going to go in a different direction for this next one. So what I'm going to do is move this most recently completed logo up here out of the way. I'm going to Alt or Control drag. Make sure we get all this selected. Duplicate it. And this time around, we're going to not use the house. We're going to go, that's a little cliche. Housing, you think houses. So that was obvious. We're going to take that out and try something a little bit more abstract using some custom shapes. I'm going to get rid of this space since we're no longer separating it with a symbol. This second word is still bolded. We're going to remove the bold there. Give it all the same weight. And also give it the same color. We're going to use this dark green. I think I'm even going to change the font here to Myriad Pro, a font I picked out earlier and thought would work well here. Slightly different look. All one color, no bold. And now we're going to bring a shape into the equation. I'm going to create use a rectangle tool to create a square. Okay. And currently that square doesn't have a stroke, so I'm going to make sure that it's selected. Actually going to take the stroke and make it black. So now our square has a black stroke. And let's do the same for our text here. Black stroke. Now it stands out a little bit more and pops off the page. Another way of giving it some dimension without using a drop shadow. So now we're going to resize this rectangle here, make it a little bit more of a square. And as you can see, this little info box here updates us to see exactly what the dimensions of it are, and that's close enough to a square. And then I'm going to scale, resize it down, holding down the shift key to maintain that square. And now what I'm going to do is duplicate that square, selecting it, doing an Alt drag. And let's see what happens when, let's try reversing the stroke and the fill and seeing what kind of effect that gives us. Let's zoom in, make it a little clearer. Okay. And now we're going to select that and just move it up so that they butt up against each other. It looks a little weird, so I'm going to take away that green stroke, and let's see what it looks like if we just make it black. Still looks a little weird. So let's try taking away the stroke altogether and see how that looks. And again, logo design is all about experimentation, playing around with things just to see how they look, and you're going to have to use your gut, your instinct, and just eyeball things sometimes. So now let's try butting those up against each other. Okay. And what I want to do now is select that whole group, do an Alt drag, and then let's see what happens if we transform and rotate this 90 degrees and turn the preview on. Hit that 180. Okay, now we have a custom-made symbol created from shapes. It's a little bland though. So what can we do to give this a little bit of character? Well, we can go into Effect, Stylize, and see what happens if we give it an inner glow. Again, let's give it a preview. Let's turn that blur down some. Let's go center. I don't like the way that looks. Let's leave it on the edge. And again, I'm just toying around with some of these just to see what happens. And that doesn't look too bad. Let's bring this over. And again, we can use our guides to help us line these things up here. That. Just want to even these out some. And there you have another variation of the novel housing logo. You can do various things, like, again, you can even scale and bring one over here. And use multiple placements of the same symbol to give a balance to the logo. That brings to a close this tutorial on how to create logo designs within Adobe Illustrator. Stay tuned for future videos which will go into further detail and take advantage of more features as you learn to enhance your skills in design.